Hello and welcome to Heilman and Haver, the Stage and Screen Podcast, episode 32, coming to you live from Port Orchard, Washington. I'm Greg Heilman.
And I'm Matt Haver. We're two local actors looking to hone our craft by exploring the best in local theater and on the big screen. Each week we bring you entertainment news and views, celebrate classic Hollywood, enjoy cocktails with a Tinseltown twist, interview talented local actors and directors, and chat with industry experts from LA to the UK.
Boy, it feels so good to be back recording in person. In a few moments, we'll welcome actor, director, and set carpenter extraordinaire Gary Fetterplace to the show. Without Gary, and I think there's a lot of people in Kitsap who will agree with that, our local theater scene just wouldn't be the same.
Oh, that's exactly right. And things are finally starting to open up, thankfully. I saw my first show last weekend at the theater where Greg and I first shared the stage and where I probably met Gary, and he serves on the board of directors at Bremerton Community Theater. The show was Shout, the Mod Musical, featuring 5 extremely talented local ladies celebrating song, dance, and humor, plenty of humor from the 1960s.
Shout plays Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays through June 27th, and with social distancing restrictions, their limited seating goes quickly. So jump online at bctshows.com and reserve tickets for Shout, their swinging 60s musical sensation.
Shout's directed by Rana Tan, production coordinator for BCT, and Rana was kind enough to join us for our first episode of our new segment, Get to Know Your Theater, where Greg and I give you a literal behind-the-scenes look at local theaters, their history, and what the future holds for them post-COVID.
Visit our YouTube channel for our interview with Rana and learn more about BCT, a true local gem. And watch our channel throughout the summer for more episodes of Get to Know a Theater.
And another local theater Greg and I mention frequently is, of course, the historic Roxy, also in Bremerton. Thanks to everyone who came out for their second installment of Movies of the Decade, showing of, for the 1950s, Rebel Without a Cause.
Our friend Jeremy Arnold provided an excellent introduction as always, and we hope you enjoyed seeing this classic on the big screen as it was intended to be seen. Mark your calendars for Saturday, June 26th, when we'll celebrate the 60s with The Graduate, directed by Mike Nichols and starring Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman. We hit the stage at 6:30 to get the show started, and Jeremy will be back virtually with another insightful introduction.
Visit RoxyBremerton.org to buy tickets, and while you're there, make sure to pick up tickets for Lebowski Fest, rolling into the Roxy tomorrow, Saturday, June 12th. It's going to be more fun than bowling in the semis, and that's not just like my opinion, man. There will be a costume contest, trivia, photo booth, drink specials, and White Russians, Caucasians galore.
Careful, man, there's a beverage here.
So grab your marmot and your green nail polish and join us at 7 p.m.
And if you love making movies as much as watching them, make sure to submit your entry into the 2021 West Sound Film Festival, being held this year August 6th through 8th. Submissions are open now and will be accepted through the end of June. Visit our YouTube channel for an interview with festival director Amy Kuhl. And for more info and to submit your project, visit westsoundfilmfestival.com.
And if you're even slightly active in the West Sound theater film scene, more than likely you've worked with or at least benefited from the skills of our friend and guest today, Gary Fetterplace. Gary is an active local actor, producer, scene designer, and set builder who grew up and got his start in theater in England and attended the Italian Conti Stage School, previously attended by his professional stage mom. His first professional stage appearance was at the London Palladium at the tender age of 11, with further appearances in London and on TV. Gary first appeared in the U.S. in Jesus Christ Superstar at Bremerton Community Theater in 2004, and he has since appeared in nearly all the local theaters in over 75 productions either on stage or behind the scenes.
Gary has also acted or been involved in nearly every Shakespeare production in the county since 2007. His first foray into producing and directing was in 2011 during the inauguration performances of BCT's RBS Hall. Since then, he has added his extensive carpentry and design skills to the local theater scene, most frequently at Bremerton Community Theater, Bainbridge Performing Arts, and Western Washington Center for the Arts, assisting with set design and building, including the 5 staircases and wraparound balcony of BCT's Romeo and Juliet, which was awarded the best set design by the Kitsap Sun newspaper for the 2015-16 season. He is currently president of the Lesser Known Players and has served as trustee and treasurer for BCT since 2009.
Gary,
welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, our first live guest after
Thank
quarantine.
you.
Yeah, feels good to be here.
First live guest, that's great.
That's right.
And what we traditionally do with our live guests is we like to share a cocktail. As if any listeners to the show know that cocktails are right up there among
Once in a
kind
while.
of our standard operating stuff. So this cocktail we're drinking tonight is called Gary's Pink Thingy.
Thank you very much.
Knowing you, Gary, there has to be a story behind this. So the drink is vodka, Chambord, and Sprite. Chambord, if you're not familiar with, is raspberry liqueur. So we'll have the recipe and the ingredients in our show notes. But tell us, Gary, a little bit about this drink.
It was a complete fluke. It came about after a birthday party. Somebody had given this bottle to me. I had no idea what it was. Sat on the shelf for a few months, and then one day got it out and started fooling with it. What have we got in the cupboard? All I had was vodka and some Sprite.
That works.
And there we have it.
It is pink. It's got kind of a rosé wine color to it, which is really nice. And I'll tell you what, this is a good summertime drink.
For sure.
So if you're looking for something to drink this summer to cool off, Gary's Pink Thingy.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
The perfect summer drink.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that, all that was left was vodka and Sprite. That's probably the start of a lot of great stories, right? So, Gary, as we just heard in your bio, theater is in your blood. You've been acting since you were a child. You were also trained classically at the same school your actress mother attended, and you appeared at the London Palladium, no pressure, at age 11, and then off to TV. So was it always expected that you'd end up on stage, or was there a moment that you realized this is for me?
No, as I was growing up, I was, dancing to music at home, and my mum said, I think you need to go to dance class, I think it was she always thought, yes, I'm going to push my kids through the theatre. And so my first role was when I was 8, and my mum was directing, and my dad did the set and the technical for a little local production of The Miracle Worker, Helen Keller. And I played, I think I was actually just a ghost. I think it was the dead brother, the crippled dead brother, and I came on in the background there. Had no lines, which was great, and that was it. And then I attended some dance classes, and a couple of 3 years later, my mum phoned home to say, "Hey boys," that's me and my brother, younger brother. My agent is asking for young children for a pantomime at Christmas in London. Who wants to do it? And I put my hand up.
And the rest is history.
The rest is.
And that was
that
was at the London Palladium.
And so there was one particular school that provided all the children for the London Palladium pantomimes at Christmas, and it was the Peggy O'Farrell stage school in East London. So I had to go along there, gave a little audition. Cute little boy with blonde hair, was in, and then they sized me up for a uniform. So we all used to have full uniforms. As they took us around Soho and such places, because London Palladium's right on the corner of that particular area. But that's how we started. And that was a fantastic experience. You couldn't have wanted more. And I just remember being in the auditorium during rehearsals there, just sitting in the dead silence in probably the third or fourth row from the stage, and it just felt like home. It was this strange, odd feeling that this is where you're meant to be, and that wasn't even on the stage. That was just being in the auditorium. It was just, some odd feeling that you get, or maybe some past life thing. Maybe I don't know. Maybe,
the universe lined up.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, you've got a unique perspective as opposed to a lot of folks locally, having acted both in England and America. Now, growing up, I think we have sometimes a preconceived notion of what theater in the UK is like, or versus theater in America. What do you see as kind of the differences? Are there differences, and if so?
Certainly from the amateur point of view, we don't have this amateur scene that you have here in America. Mostly it's all professional theatres, or at least semi-professional. The local stuff is what they would call am-dram, and it's normally pretty bad. It is truly not very talented people trying to put on a show in the local hall, and that's kind of the only kind of community theatre as such. It's changed a little bit in the last 20 years or so, but certainly 20-30 years ago when I was there, there wasn't much of a scene. I couldn't believe it when I came here to Kitsap County, and there was 8 or 9 local theatres, and then I went to my first audition at Bremerton Community Theater. And there we are. It's actually a real theatre, nearly 200 seats, a fly system, and all the amenities inside the building also, So it was, the real thing. So I was quite impressed by that. And we don't really have that kind of thing there in the UK.
It's interesting. I think maybe, I don't want to say you lucked out by coming to Kitsap. I remember growing up in central Pennsylvania, we didn't have a theater community. It was high school. It was high school theater.
Right.
And otherwise, there was really nothing that I was aware of. So I think Kitsap is just uniquely situated to support so many of these local theaters. You mentioned Amdram. Is that like amateur drama?
Yeah,
or?
amateur dramatics.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'd be the local amateur dramatic society.
Okay.
Which is typical in the local church hall or whatever. And the pretty low level productions.
As a child in Britain, would it just be through the school then?
Yeah,
Were there
there'd be
drama programs in like
school,
middle schools?
Yeah, there's certainly plenty of school things going on.
Okay.
And things have changed in the last 20 years. I did find out that there was actually a nice local group that were doing a true community theatre with children productions and so forth. So things have changed a little bit. But in general, it was much more on the professional and semi-professional productions. And certainly that's what my mother was doing in the 70s. And that was at a large theatre in our local town. It was a 900-seater, a bit like the Admiral Theatre. And it was productions there. And some of the people were actually getting paid to be in the production. So it was community theatre but semi-professional.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the touring groups from Broadway go to the UK, and they have their own professional group where you have the companies in various theaters around London. Is that something that's grown over the years too, or has that always just kind of been there where you've had kind of an overseas quote unquote Broadway presence?
No, there'd always be touring groups. So our local town and our local theatre, 900-seater, a bit like the Admiral Theatre, would have touring visits from various national tours or international tours. But then they would also put on productions with semi-professionals and local talent. And that would be about the going thing. That would be the only outlet. Yeah, as you say, here in Kitsap County, it's just incredible that there are lots of small little theatre groups that are able to function and provide an outlet for people.
So you came to the U.S. as an adult, obviously. Have you noticed any differences in the way that actors are trained? Like, say, in London, is it a little bit more classical, a little more Shakespearean? In the U.S., maybe?
No, I'd say not.
Really?
Yeah, no, I mean, they kind of probably stay away from Shakespeare.
Really?
Yeah, because
it's overdone?
It's overdone. It's
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's certainly,
so it's novel over here.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not there anymore. Oh, what's with this guy?
So it's very much, they're much more into, and particularly in London because it's so cosmopolitan.
Right.
There are so many outlets and theatre groups doing anything you can think of. They're putting that show on, and you can't think of, there aren't enough, And Seattle has a similar kind of scene like that with lots of tiny little theatres doing, stuff that are out of the mainstream, which is similar to the lesser known players on Bainbridge Island.
Right. So by day you're now a professional home inspector. Now, I got a little inkling of maybe where the hands-on stuff came from, if your dad was building sets as well when you were a child. But when did you first develop an interest in working with your hands and the building arts and started becoming interested in scene design? Was it?
I was a home inspector. That was my first business that I started here in the US. And then people kept asking me, can I recommend someone to do the fixes that I'd, reported on? And I would recommend some people, and then they would let them down or overcharge them or not show up. And people were then pressing me to, can't you just do it, Gary? We want to hire you.
Yeah.
So it was just like, oh, my goodness. And that's when I started in 2006, Dr. Watson. So my home inspection business was Sure Look Homes. And my contracting business then became Dr. Watson. And
I love it.
That's the history of that. And to follow on that question, how did I then decide to get involved with set building? I could see what they were doing during a particular production at BCT. We were doing Noises Off, and I don't know if you know that show, but there's a 2-story set that completely turns around on stage.
Oh, wow.
So the second act, you see everything behind the scenes of what's going on. Anyway, during the rehearsals and building that particular set, and it had been designed very well and generally put together very well, And then they were adding various other things to the staircases, like the handrails and things, particularly the back side of the set, and they were appallingly unsafe. Yeah. And I, as an actor, had to then actually be on those stairs with those handrails.
So self-preservation,
and
really.
Indeed, it was kind of like, this is not acceptable. And I'm like, I need to change this. Have at it, Gary. So I was like, oh, gee. So now I've got to do my own stuff, you know. And that's really how I then started getting hands-on, and I basically just taught myself, you know, basic carpentry and building. And I had a broad knowledge of building already. Being a building inspector, you would hope I would have some broad knowledge. And I've been in the building industry all my life anyway, so that came with it. And then it was a few years later then when we were building the RBS hall, and suddenly, right, okay, what's going to go on, what's going to happen, and who's going to do it? And I was working with Bob Montgomery, the father of the theatre at that time, and mainly because nobody else actually wanted to work with him. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So I said, yeah, I'll direct that first show. Right, so are we building anything for it? And Bob said, no, we're not doing anything. No, it's got to be rough. And I'm like, oh, I don't like the sound of that.
Uh-oh. What show was it?
Box and Cox.
Oh, really?
Indeed.
All right.
So
to premiere at WWCA.
So it's the 10th anniversary of the RBS Hall, and here we are at WWCA, just about to start Box and Cox again.
Yeah, and a virtual option as well. It's pretty exciting. They just announced today, so fun stuff happening. So then, really, following up on that, something Greg and I learned in our interview with Rana at BCT is that black box, the RBS Hall, really came in handy during quarantine. And really, and for not only storage, but for expanded space to rehearse, because of course Shout was rehearsing all throughout. So that was a good investment.
Oh yeah, and it cost quite a bit of money. Well, we got a gift from a past actor, and he was actually the treasurer for Bremerton City back in the late '60s, early '70s, and he was also senior financial officer of some bank. Anyway, he left us some money when he passed. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough money, but he did leave us some money, so we decided to build the RBS Hall. It was Robert B. Stewart that left us some money, and then we added some extra money to it, and we got that extra space. And the theatre always wanted that. They always needed a separate rehearsal room, you know, because otherwise you were always on the stage, and there was never anybody, you know, you never could actually then do more than one production at any one time, or at least it would be very difficult. Whereas now, we normally have somebody rehearsing in the black box whilst we have a show actually on the stage at the same time.
I think I can see the value in having someone with your knowledge and skill set building sets. I've been on a few where you have stairs that are either uneven or
nightmare,
deeper than or shallower than you're used to at home. Mm-hmm. So bringing the kind of standard that you're used to onto a stage definitely makes an actor think about things. They can concentrate on acting. They don't have to worry about where's my next step going to land or something like that.
Act naturally.
Yeah. Going back to the BCT thing, so we did the tour the other day and saw the incredible workshop that they have. Yeah. Were you involved, since you're intimately involved with the set construction, especially over there, with organizing the workshop or kind of maturing it to where it is? Because it seems when you need a piece of lumber for a particular thing, you know where to go and get it. Have you been involved in that?
Yeah, as volunteers and or as a trustee, whenever I'm doing a show, you end up putting extra time in doing something in the workshop, organising or bringing. I've donated quite a bit of lumber to the theatre during the last 10, 15 years, whenever I get surplus stuff from various jobs or stuff from other clients, I tend to always just deliver it down to the theatre, and we make space for it. Then we've got lumber again for the next show, and it's very expensive. At the end of the day, you end up having to buy stuff to build stuff and of course there's not enough room to store stuff, so generally everything gets broken down thereafter. Although people like to save steps that are uneven and not built correctly. And
You'll never know when you need it.
Oh, geez, yeah. 40 years later, it's still there.
So your set design for Romeo and Juliet was recognized in 2016, and you designed sets for everything from The Crucible, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Peter and the Starcatchers. to Agatha Christie's Go Back for Murder, which I was in, I think, right before, really,
Right.
one of the last shows at BCT. Great set. Had fun helping with the build. What's been your most challenging show? Was it that Romeo and Juliet set, or has there been any others that really threw you?
Most challenging. I mean, most sets are fairly challenging because you may have this broad outline of what you intend to build, but then what's actually available in the workshop that we can actually use, and that's really And then okay, well, we haven't got that, so now we've got to go and buy it or find it or whatever, and so forth. So a particular show for the lesser known players, we were renting the Erickson Theater in Seattle for Casa Valentina. And Casa Valentina is a 2-story set. There's an upstairs, downstairs, and there's scenes in both areas. But the theatre is in Seattle. So what did we do? We built the set in the director's backyard during the summer. And we got it to where we believed we had a working skeleton. We then disassembled it, put it in a truck. And we only had 4 days prior to opening to get the truck over there, get the thing built, then add everything else to it to complete the piece. We didn't have quite enough time for opening night, as the critic actually mentioned in his review of the play. The set doesn't quite look finished, and he's absolutely right. We finally finished it the following day prior to the next production. Well, one of the problems with renting somebody else's theatre and you're using their space, they actually use it during the day, and part of the contract was we actually had to manually move the whole set backwards 15 feet so they could actually use the front end of the stage area during the daytime.
Oh, mercy.
So it was absolutely, the restrictions on us were quite something. But it was an amazing set when it was actually finally built, with 2 full staircases, one at the back, one at the front, again, as per usual.
And they were square and standard height.
They were square and standard height. Of
course
well,
they were.
Well, the poor gentlemen were actually dressed as ladies, so they were all in high heels too.
Oh.
So they had these big head pieces on. So if you know the show, then Harvey Weinstein, then you'll understand the kind of thing that it is. Lots of issues there. So good handrails, kickboards, and so forth, wide enough. Not these crazy, pathetic staircases you get at some of the community theatres. How the hell do I get up there and down there without breaking my neck?
Especially in high heels.
Oh, yeah.
So
I would need an escalator if I was in high heels, I think. Build one of those next time.
Tow rope or something.
If we ever do something like it hot, there'd better be an escalator.
Yes, there you go. So you mentioned the different budgets that theaters have, and I think there's always designing in a pinch or on a penny. What is the most unique thing or most creative thing you've had to create from a set perspective, whether it's as a result of budget constraints or something, or just not having material to make something that you had to go and be creative?
we did a show, the Harold Pinter one acts at BCT a few years ago, and one of those shows is called The Dumb Waiter. Basically, I turned up at the theatre this particular day, and I knew by the end of the day I had to have a dumb waiter built. And for those that don't understand what a dumb waiter is, it's a moving box inside a box that goes up and down. And,
An elevator for stuff.
Elevator for
Or
stuff.
little children in some cases.
That's also true.
Yeah. And then it needs to be incorporated within the set, and it mustn't be seen to be in operation by the audience. And we were doing the show inside the black box, so we had height restrictions. And we were quite lucky. I found some old pulley wheels from the old fly system that were still at the theatre.
Like the ones that are on display now?
Yeah, exactly. One of those. It was one of those. And I managed to incorporate those. They were my pulleys for my ropes and chains. And by the end of the day, I had this thing built, and it was actually I was quite amazed.
Well, yeah, we saw those pulleys.
Yes.
And if you've seen our Get to Know a Theater from BCT, you will have seen them too, and it's definitely something that's got to be challenging to work with.
And the problem with this particular show was we had one full set in front of the other set, which meant then we had to actually strike that dumb waiter between the two shows. So it had to be broken down into 2 parts there and then in the interval.
Because there were shorts, of course, yeah.
And,
Wow.
and we're in the RBS hall, and we've only got a standard doorway if you're going back through into the theatre, or you've got to go out through the double doors. Thankfully, we managed to. I can't quite remember what we did with it. We pushed it somewhere out of the way. But yeah, so you have these issues and these problems. So okay, so it's great. It's all on set. It's ready to go. It works. But once that play was over, we then had to there and then during the interval take it apart and get rid of it, ready for the second play, which was a completely different set behind the set. So we had to strike that whole set, which was full wall crossing from corner to corner of the RBS hall.
And how much time are we talking about in between shows?
Just a 15-minute interval.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
so all that wall had to come down. That dumbwaiter had to be broken, and it weighed quite a bit as well, because it has to be sturdy to actually handle this box going up and down. So that was an interesting.
Good answer. Wow. Well, I love some of the creativity you see. When we did Appointment with Death, the first show that we did together, there's an elevator, and the elevator is quite active, and it was simply a small window that was backlit with a small piece of plywood that someone manually moved up and down, and and Jeffrey Bassett, our director, was so proud of that thing, and it gave it the illusion.
The illusion was made.
It was
great.
really cool,
Yeah.
and it's just something that simple. It's got to be really fun.
When I was brought into BPA to do Peter and the Starcatcher, and they had a wonderful set designer, an artistic set designer, had these beautiful sketches, all painted, of the Peter and the Starcatcher set. And anyway, so I turned up on Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Okay, Gary, here's the sketches. So we need to build this, and that. And I'm just looking. Thinking, oh my God. Right, okay, I'll start with this boat. That looks the most difficult thing that's going to take the longest. We better start there. I think, okay, I got that one. I think I can do that one. I got to do that. So we're out in the workshop there, and I'm like, so what have we got? What have we got? And Deirdre Hadlock said, Gary, I think we've got some bendy board. And I'm like, what? Some bendy board. The previous technical director used to buy it, particularly for these kinds of applications where you had to build something that had a beautiful curve, which is what we needed. We needed a beautiful curved front section of this boat. And it was about $90 a sheet, which sounds really cheap today, considering the cost of plyboard. This bendy board, which was absolutely fantastic. Cut strips off, built up this planking, and well, behold, by the end of the day, we had a boat. It was like it's always surprising what you end up with.
Well, thank you again to our guest, Gary Fetterplace. Join us next week for the second half of our interview with Gary and more on his techniques for stagecraft and design. And if you enjoy the show, make sure to follow us and share the podcast with a friend or two. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora.
We'd love to hear from you, so please join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, and email us with thoughts and comments at heilmanandhaver@gmail.com. As always, thank you for supporting local theater and for joining us on Heilman and Haver.